I love to see you guys, Jackie, Stephanie, Dolores, Peggy, Nancy, Sharon, Carol. This is a wonderful webinar. You guys know we do these every Thursday, and I love doing this. Today, we're going to talk about being safe with your shoulders. So I'm very excited about this one. And while glute training is getting the recognition it deserves, what we want to look at is what's going on with our shoulders, okay? And we see especially because pickleball is picking up, it's going to be summer soon. We're all going to be playing, well, I won't be playing golf, but a lot of our clients are going to be playing golf. They're going to be playing tennis. They're using these long extended arms. They're hitting balls and decelerating on things. And we have to think about our shoulder girdle. The other thing I always talk about with webinars and when we're doing with shoulders is, unfortunately, the medical community only does physical therapy for a very limited time period. We end up with these people dumped on us with their injuries, or worse yet, they don't have insurance, or they don't want to go in to see a medical technician for whatever reason, financial, or it's just time-wise, and we end up dealing with them. So we're going to talk to these wonderful experts. We have Summer Sides with us. She's a professor of exercise science and a founder of GX United. She's the creator of Counterflow Yoga. So Summer does a lot of personal training, focuses on yoga as well. And she's worked with a lot of various different companies. We're really excited to have Summer with us here. We've got my good friend Andrew Gavigan here. He's a recognized speaker in the fitness industry. He's been a master trainer and served as the director of education of several different companies. And he is the founder of Most Fit, which has a small line of fitness equipment. And he's also NSAM and NFPT certified trainer. He's also going to be presenting at our Atlanta Mania convention. We have Chris Gellert with us here. He's a practicing physical therapist for 20 years with a strong clinical background in sports injury, which is amazing. And then I have with us here Patrick Mummey. And we're kind of excited. We invited Patrick to join us kind of last minute. He is the founder and creator of Symmetry. And Symmetry is a wonderful, it's almost like a prehab, post-hab, have training program that deals with individuals that might have some discomfort or pain going on with their exercise programs or just in regular everyday life. And I'm one of his victims, one of his clients who is working on the program, and I've really found some really fun results with it. So I thought we invited Patrick with us today as well. So we've got some great, I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Sarah Cooperman. I'm the CEO of SCW Fitness Education. I have no fitness related degree except an undergraduate degree with a minor in dance, but I'm a licensed attorney, or I was a licensed attorney. Now I'm just an attorney that basically doesn't practice and owns SCW, Seat Fitness, and Water in Motion. And we have our wonderful webinar coordinator and help creator, Carter Anderson, who's running us ragged and keeping us in line to run these seminars. We have just about 200 people, a little over 200 people that have registered for this webinar. We always run it on podcast. We always run the recordings. And we're expecting, we already have a little over 41 participating. We'll end up with probably a little over 50 participating. And then we double that with our webinars and our podcasts. So everybody loves our recordings. So we're going to dive right in. If you know me, you know I start fast and I start furious because I hate webinars where they chat about selling stuff. So what we're going to talk about is starting with assessment, or the various questions you ask to locate the cause of the shoulder discomfort. And before we do that, I want you to move your mouse, and you're going to go to the bottom of the page and to the left of the green share button. I love you guys to put in the chat button. And it looks like a little message, and type in where you're from if you would. We'd love to see who you are and where you're from. Feel free to type in your first name, and you can ask questions because you're the live ones that took the time to show up. The other thing I would like you to do, and I don't do this as often, but I'm going to start doing it. Can you go to the bottom of your screen when you move your mouse? Move 3 movements over from that green share button. See your reaction button. And if you would, give me a thumbs up if you're a personal trainer. Can you do that if you're a personal trainer? Give me the thumbs up if you're a personal trainer. Now, these will disappear on their own, so I'm going to wait for them to disappear. And then what I want to do, and they're starting to disappear now, would you go back, and if you're a group fitness instructor, click on that and give me that thumbs up. Can you give me the thumbs up if you're a group fitness instructor? Okay, very cool. Love it. All right, so we're seeing a lot of group fitness instructors and almost half as many personal trainers. And what I want you to do is give me a heart if you're involved with the medical community. So let's do that. Can you give me a heart if you're involved with a medical technician? That's very, very cool. And we're seeing a couple of those as well. So thank you for doing that. And I'm going to start with you, Summer. Before we turned the camera on, I turned right to you, and I asked you, what assessments or questions do you use when you're looking to kind of assess any shoulder discomfort that you might have with your clients?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So as she gave that welcome and introduction about me, I live my life in more of the personal training and yoga space, especially. So staying within scope of practice is super important to me, of not necessarily assessing their pain, but hey, if they're in there with me and they're like, my shoulder's not feeling happy, or if I'm just doing any type of general assessments, I have some basic kind of go-tos. One of my absolute favorites comes from the functional movement screen. So if anyone is familiar with FMS and that, it's part of their shoulder mobility assessment, where very simple, you just have the client stand, they place their hand on the shoulder, and if you look at them, the goal is for them to get the elbow in line with shoulder. So all they have to do is, if they lift up on that, that's going to give me some oh, they've got some pain going on. So the hope is that they can do that freely without any pain, without any movement. That's one of those things that I always do with clients. My other kind of favorite go-to one is just, I was going to turn my back too soon, is a shoulder back scratch. It's called multiple different things. I always love doing it with the thumbs inside the hands, so that way I can really assess the space between knuckles versus them trying everything they can to get their fingers to reach each other. And that's not necessarily giving me the information I want about the shoulders. So those are kind of my two big go-to. And if someone is saying to me, hey, I've got my shoulder hurting, I always start right there.
Oh, that's nice. And I like your test, because you're also working with a shorter lever, which I think there's a decreased risk of injury on that. Chris, you're a licensed physical therapist. What are your thoughts on that? Oh, you're muted, Chris.
As you know, I'm both a therapist and a trainer. Been a trainer for 22 years. I love it. It's great. I completely agree with Summer. The other thing I look at is active range, what they can do. But if they have a painful arc that's 60 to 120, that's typically going to be in the glenohumeral joint. So if they're having pain between 6 to 120 degrees of abduction, something's going on in that region. And again, we talk about men more than women. It's usually impingement. It's pain in the front of the shoulder. They're tight pecs. They're rounded shoulders. They're just weak scapular muscles. So it's the quality. I know the audience here is not physical therapists. They're not to diagnose, but what's it like? What's made it feel better? What's made it feel worse? What have you done to help it? And I think the audience should know, if something's causing pain, ice it. Don't put heat on it. Put ice on it, rest it. And if it's not getting better, if you've done stretching and anti-angelics and anti-inflammatories, go see a therapist, go see a chiropractor, go see a physician and get some help. Don't try to rehab it on your own, and muster through it and just kind of go through there and just make it worse. So to answer your question.
Yeah, that's interesting. Patrick, you do a lot of assessments on people, and when you discover that, how are you addressing that in your practice?
Well, I come at it from a pretty different approach. My background was in athletic training. I was a baseball player at San Diego State, and I have 2 tears in my shoulder as we speak. But I went through traditional therapies, et cetera, had a lot of chronic issues, ended up getting into the corrective exercise field. And what I've created is an objective measurement process that actually deals with posture, not just from the shoulder, but from every joint in your body, specifically starting at the pelvis. So when I get somebody that comes in with shoulder pain, for example, one of the first measurements I take is at the pelvic level, seeing whether just from a static perspective, and that's kind of where we differentiate ourselves from most treatment models, is if you're standing there with a hip that's elevated, or you have a PSIS that's disparate, or your hips rotated, then by the nature of Newton's third law, which is action reaction, your body's going to countercompensate in order to rebalance your eyes around gravity. So a lot of times what we see, and especially from my experience playing baseball, is that if your body is constantly already statically out of alignment, then your shoulders actually automatically put out of alignment just because of that relationship. And so if you try to take that body and then move with it, lift weights with it, do whatever you're doing with it, then you are a potential risk for injury. And if you do get injured, then you don't necessarily want to just look at the shoulder, although the rehab for the shoulder is necessary. In our opinion, you have to look at the entire body as it relates to that shoulder. So
and that centers around the posture. And
yeah.
And Andrew, do you do any posture work with your clients that help with the shoulder girdle? If you've assessed, and I want to know what assessments you use, do you integrate some posture analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of us, if anything, do the classic squat or overhead squat assessment early in our relationship with the client. I don't tend to do a session of specific assessments, but what I like to do, and as a matter of fact, my new trainer, new client session that I'll be doing, I think, at Atlanta, talks about the sort of approach I take when I'm meeting a new client. Because I want that client to have a successful workout and feel like they got their money's worth in that first session, I try to give them 80% of what they want and 20% of what they need, or some version of that. And I'll give them a workout, but I'll use movements during that workout to help me assess not only their posture through their upper body and their lower body, their ankles, but also their balance, also their comfortability or comfort level with intense or high impact exercise. That's something I want to understand as well. I also need to assess, of course, how much they want to tell me their life story while they're working out, which is, as we know, is something our clients like to do. They like to chat with us, and that sometimes might impair the idea of whatever programming we had with them. So after I've assessed their posture, and I'm always going to see a lot of that forward translation, like we just talked about, I tend to work a little bit on strengthening their back, stretching and mobilizing their chest, given that there's no pain or discomfort. I never like to work through pain. I like to assess where there is pain. And like Chris mentioned, if I do find it, I keep an eye on it. I try my best to analyze it. And if I have to, I refer them out. But if I can work through or around any discomforts, rather, I will. I'll try to do my best to strengthen their upper back, to mobilize their shoulder blades via different exercises, activations, and mobility techniques like myofascial release, for example.
And what are some of the exercises that you recommend if you discover their discomfort? I'm going to shorten this just a little bit, or I think restructure it. What I love what you said, and Summer, you reiterated this as well, that you refer people out if they're experiencing that pain. And yet we're personal trainers, we're group fitness instructors. They're there to get a workout. So what I like what you said, Andrew, is that you work around it. And I think that's really key because we still got to work with them, but we
Right.
kind of avoid that area
Right.
and maybe try to increase their comfort.
Correct.
But what are some of the exercises you would do to strengthen that? And Patrick, I'm going to come back to you as well, because I love the emphasis on posture, because we know it starts, all the way from the feet and shoots all the way up. So what are some of those exercises, Andrew?
Good. So as much as I don't want to make an assessment and try to apply physical therapy on my own, since it's out of my scope, I also don't want to completely ignore and bypass the first instance of discomfort. First, I'll assess whether that client has good sort of somatic instincts, whether they're actually feeling pain or if it's their first day ever exercising and they just don't like it. I still need to address both of those things. But for example, if there's a bit of impingement or discomfort, maybe behind the neck, one of the things I always do in my particular sessions with clients is I'll do activations and myofascial release, like I mentioned. And I have an example here of one of the tools I use, awkward, I know, but these are called yoga tune-up balls, and SCW has versions of these peanuts as well. They're kind of these are a little softer than lacrosse balls, but you can get these in different densities. And I like to try to create a little more mobility by simply massaging where the rhomboids and the traps are in between the shoulder blades. Oftentimes we'll have maybe not necessarily tightness there, although I would see that a lot, but we might just simply have a lack of, again, somatic response, a lack of ability to mobilize the shoulder blades and use the correct muscles. So I had an instance, I played football when I was a kid, but I also spent probably 20,000 hours with a guitar over my shoulder. I was on tour when I was younger. I have an enormous amount of scar tissue here, and I've had the hardest time in the past decade getting my shoulder blade to move properly. So it created some injury up here in my acromioclavicular joint, and I had to get a surgery where they actually shaved the distal end of my clavicle, which is the collarbone here. And it was very successful. But the reason I had all of these impingements and the tissue got so irritated is because the shoulder blade didn't properly move. And we tried for years to get that to happen. If I had never developed that scar tissue, I would have had a better opportunity to move that shoulder blade. So I try to help my clients create a little more mobility through various areas of their body, so perhaps reaching up or reaching out doesn't hurt as much. If I can apply a little bit of relief, then we can go from there, and I still won't have passed my scope of practice.
No, that's nice. That's quite helpful. Chris, are there exercises that you do to increase the functional strength of the shoulder or the mobility of the shoulder? Are there particular exercises that you do with your clients that you possibly integrated by being a PT?
There's a plethora, but keeping it really short because we have a certain amount of time here. I think I told you earlier in the beginning that I with every patient, whether it be a rotator cuff repair, whether it be impingement syndrome, whether it be even a joint replacement, Sarah, I'll do rows because the rhomboids are weaker. They're a phasic muscle according to, again, the research. I'll do pull down for low trap. I'll do external rotation, which again is doing, or we call them no monies or no money or external rotation. And I think what, piggybacking on what Andrew said is stretch the tight, strengthen the weak. So I'll typically have a lot of patients stretch their upper traps. Like today, I had a gentleman who had shoulder pain, and it was a classic thoracic outlet where his nerves were being pinched. His upper trap was tight. He just has a lot of tightness in his rib. He's got tightness in his scalenes, tightness in the levator scapula, and he just needs to open up, and he's rounded like this. Comes in almost like a hunchback in Notre Dame. And I'm like, you just got to come back and just open up everything. So that's the first thing I'll do. Second thing I'll do is I really like to do scapular stabilization. That could be wall walks with a TheraBand or wall clocks with a TheraBand, or even beginning with something simple as a plank, plank on the ground or a side plank. And I think that scapular stability helps restore the scapular clock, which means how the scapula moves on the thorax. And then lastly, part of it is how do we integrate this dynamically, and then using more dynamic like medicine ball and tubing and things of that nature. So it becomes it's like baby steps. We're going to creep, we're going to cruise, and we're going to walk, and we're going to run. And I think that I tailor it just like a wedding dress. I'm going to make it specific to the patient. I'm going to make sure it's timely and it works. And is it going to be the best to get their best results? And then reassess. As a personal trainer out there in our audience, and myself as one in the group exercise, we all should ask ourselves, is that working? What is it doing? How does it feel? And like Andrew said, using myofascial release is awesome. Stretch those tight. Refer to a massage therapist. Use heat. And keep that whole body dynamically open is something we need to do. And don't forget to integrate yoga, cross-training methods to keep those fascial lines and slings moving and gliding.
Okay, so and what you mentioned, Chris, before is if somebody's in discomfort, don't use heat, use ice.
Ice.
But if you're trying to increase range of motion, what you're talking about in tightness, where there might be a little discomfort, but there's not pain, that's when you talk about heat or warming the body up before they begin movement patterns.
Exactly. You got it. Yep.
Okay, very cool. And Summer, you do specialize in yoga. So are there particular exercises that we can integrate either right in the middle of our class or at the end of our programs that we're working with people?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because one of the big challenges oftentimes in the group fitness space, whether it's yoga, whether you're teaching a boot camp, whether you're teaching, I've taught all formats of group fitness over the course of my 20+ year career, and you don't know the bodies that are sitting in front of you, right? Like you don't know if Sally over here has a bad hip and Joe over here has a bad shoulder. So one of the approaches that I developed very early in my career was just this kind of obsessive, as someone told me once, obsessive need to focus on posture and postural type assessments, and not assessments, but postural type work, whether it was in my yoga class or elsewhere. And with that, what I really, in all the times when I'm programming my classes, so if I think about that, I really focus on this 2-to-1 ratio, meaning I'm going to do 2 times the amount of pulling type of work, or things that all of what Chris and Andrew were talking about, of that great like stability that you're building in the shoulder. One of my favorite things to do. So I'm going to do 2 pulling to every 1 push. So in a yoga,
it's almost 2. I do the exact same thing. 2 back exercises to 1 chest exercise.
Exactly.
That's a little broad. I mean, I'm making it a little broad, but I think that's what you're referring to.
That's exactly what I was saying. So like in my yoga class, for example, if we have done chaturangas, I'm going to then go back to maybe we do some cat and cows, where we're really trying to mobilize and stabilize through that. I'm going to do like a scap retraction push-up. So maybe before we go into the chaturanga, I'm going to have your hands on the ground and let's just scap retract back and forth, so that we can really try to emphasize building into that strength and the stability that is needed, because then we can work on the stability at the end. Again, some of those really great stretches that Chris mentioned, of just things like this coming down. But I also think it's really important that we remember both dynamic and static stretches. So I love things like this. Like anytime, like my shoulder is popping every time I do that right now, because I've been at my desk all day. But anytime, like in the middle of a class, I can get people to just do this in some way, whether it's a programmed exercise or like, hey, let's all take a break and do that. I'm going to, because then we can really focus on like, let's open up our chest right there as well. Because again, just the more that you can do that, opening that movement and that stability into the shoulders, infused within the hard stuff of a class, it might even be harder for the members than the push-ups that they're going to do. That's one of the things that I've learned, especially with group fitness, is like they want to have the hard stuff, and sometimes the mobility and stability is the hard stuff, and the push-ups and the lunges is the easy stuff. So,
That's interesting. And the other thing that this relates to a lot of the exercises that I did in my program and that I do in my program with symmetry. Like Patrick, I love the simple exercises to just get my shoulder blades back and increase my posture. I was laying in a supine position on my back, and I had my arms almost in a 90-degree, just simply pushing my elbows into the ground. And I could feel it's a sense of that pulling exercise, but I'm just using my natural strength. So I know I'm not going to overdo it. And I'm using just a stable support, which supports my entire back in a normal curvature with my knees were bent. And I'm just pressing gently my elbows into the ground, and it helps with my posture. But it was really focused, I think, also for the shoulder girdle. And then Patrick, you guys did another exercise with me where my arms were fully extended, but I was rotating my thumbs, my thumbs were up, and I could just rotate my thumbs back, forward and back, emphasizing the back movement, which again helped the posture, which in turn assisted with my shoulder stability. What other, am I correct in this? And what other exercises do you guys integrate? It was just really brilliant.
Well, kind of pinging off of what Summer said, really how we describe our program is scientific yoga, for lack of better description, because we really focus on isometrics. I'm not focusing on dynamic movement. And, the one thing that I learned that differentiated, how I focused on the body is that there's really two sets of muscle groups. You have what are called intrinsic muscles that by definition do not change length with external force. So their job is to stabilize. And then you have dynamic muscles that do change length with external force. And their job really is to move joints, right? But we kind of get blinded by postural compensations over life because of sitting too much and, repetitive stress and all these negative factors in our lives that cause our body to get really out of alignment over time. And so the question becomes, do we really focus on the shoulder first, even though it's in pain? And that's kind of where the measurements come in, because sequentially, I might want to fix the hips first before I go to the shoulder. And so because we work on isometrics, the exercises that we're giving you, right, as you know, are kind of in a proper order based upon the numbers that we produce. But the exercises are very modest, I guess, for lack of a better description, but they're specifically designed to not just address a joint for example, for the shoulder, but what are you trying to do with that exercise? And in our case, almost everybody that we see has an elevated hip, which causes an offset in the spine, which causes an elevation in the shoulder. So we would, in that scenario, address the elevated hip first to pull the hips level, pull the spine a little bit straighter, then do an exercise that everybody at home can do, which is a really simple one. You basically make what I call a golfer's grip, which is appropriate because the Masters are on right now and I should be watching it. But you take what's called a golfer's grip. You take your middle knuckle to your temple, and you can do this sitting, you can do this lying on your back in different positions. But for example, here I'm just going to be sitting, but I want to square my legs up. I want to square my feet up. I want to roll my hips up to get my body into extension. And I'm literally just going to flex and extend through the shoulder, but I'm using my knuckles as a reference point to, as you referred to previously, shorten the lever, which really positions the shoulder blades and the shoulders to actually retract and contract, but in a very isometric specific position. And what this exercise does is that not only does it release the pecs, it helps to engage the rhomboids and extension, but it ultimately levels out the shoulders, which is what we're really trying to correct in that scenario. So the exercises that you've been doing have all been kind of sequentially after we fixed your hips to really stabilize the shoulders in a very isometric way.
Yeah, and everybody's wacky, okay? Everybody's wacky. Like Andrew, sorry, but you're wacky, big guy, okay? It's like he's carrying this guitar because I'm sure he was so cool back in his 20s. But for me, I have 4 kids. I had I had always had a kid on one hip and was probably smacking the kid with the other hand. Just kidding, would never hit my children. But I was on the phone or I was stirring something while I was cooking and I always had a kid on the hip, which I have a kid on the hip. And then what's going to happen? Look what immediately happens with my shoulders. And so I'm all whacked out. And a lot of times we get used to this and then we overemphasize one position or another and we do get out of whack. But I like these exercises, Patrick, because as you said, they do keep you honest. I love that term. It's not like you're going to sit there and drip sweat performing an exercise. It's not dynamic. It is more static, Chris, like you described. And I think that that's pretty fascinating. I think some of those exercises we can integrate into our programs, which I think would be great. I want to encourage you guys, if you have definite questions about things, throw it in the chat box. I try to stay aware of that, and I will try to get our experts to answer them. So I like the exercises, especially with the knuckles and increasing the functional strength and mobility of the shoulder. Now I'm going to ask you something that might be a little bit, I don't know, just interesting, harder. I'm not quite sure. How do we do it with active agers? Like, Andrew, are there particular exercises that you try to encourage? And are there exercises that you might specifically discourage?
Yes, good question. And I know a lot of us do have active agers as clients, myself included. My clients today were all in their 70s, and some of them have had very specific shoulder issues. Some of them had general shoulder discomfort, and some of them still do. So there's a handful of exercises I like to do. Some of them, the mechanism is a little more clear in why I provide that for the shoulders. Some of them are a little elementary, and I'm just simply trying to get them to potentially engage the back muscles. So my number one tool that I use is my thumb right here. I think we probably all do it right there between the shoulder blades, just to give them a little physical feedback to ideally make sure that movements happen with the shoulder blades, the shoulder, and the arm, not simply just the arm. One of the things I do to activate here, I'm using my late 60s pull apart, just because we're next to my antique fitness collection. But ideally, I just use a resistance tube. And I like to have clients simply do with soft elbows, with shoulders depressed, with chest tall, a pull apart, as long as there's no discomfort, to try to get them to really prime using their rhomboids, traps, and rear deltoid. And I like to have them do it either with palms forward or palms up. Sometimes it makes it more comfortable for their shoulders if they do palms up. And then another one of my favorites, to simply make sure that they are neuromuscularly engaged, that they've sort of engaged the cognitive abilities involved in stability and proprioception, but also, again, to physically help them stabilize the shoulder, find the proper postures. I do what's called a bottoms up carry. I don't necessarily make them do overhead presses or anything dynamic. And this is the kettlebell we probably use the most at 7 pounds. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a lot. And I have them walk up and down the driveway or the gym. And the bonus I get with this one, I know that we correlate grip strength oftentimes with health as we age. I'm sure that the mechanism behind that is probably not super accurate, but I do know that there's nothing wrong with having better grip strength, especially as you age. So I'll have them practice this on both sides. So I'll have them do it unilaterally. There's always a very obvious difference that they report feeling. So we try to keep it light, keep it steady. And as long as they're not going to bonk themselves in the head, it seems like a super safe and low impact exercise. And then lastly, I don't have a good demonstration over here, but I like to do sort of an elevated push-up. I use a bar, a squat bar, for example. I'll put it about waist height, put them in the push-up position, and I'll have them do a push-up as long as it's comfortable. But sort of like Summer referenced earlier, I'll have them do a little extra scapular protraction. Sometimes I'll even have them start with a scapular articulation. I don't know how well we can see that in the camera, but I'm simply protracting and retracting the shoulder. if anything, to make sure that those muscles are primed and ready to both stabilize and mobilize during our workout.
Oh, that's interesting. And we do have a question from Krista, who said, do you have recommendations for people who have had, and I'm going to add, or currently have frozen shoulder? And I'm going to throw this at Chris, again, because of the physical therapy background you have, but keeping in mind that we do have a lot of personal trainers and group fitness instructors that are on this call.
Totally. It's a great question, Krista and Sarah. Keeping it real simple, there's 4 types. It's pain, freezing, frozen, thawing, and literally the research shows it can last for months to almost 9 to 12 months. So, and you talk about what is frozen shoulder, it's basically the capsules inside the joint becomes frozen or adhered, and it becomes very, very irritable. What causes it could be wearing a sling too long, can be causing it to protecting and not using it. But you want to stretch the pecs. You want to work on pec stretching. You want to do posterior capsule stretching, which is really important. And, if they haven't gone to a therapist, that's huge. I'm not promoting therapy, by the way, but that they're doing things like rows. They're doing what Andrew said, doing serratus punch. And that helps restore the scapular rhythm or that clock. But they've gotta really keep up stretching. Stretching is huge. Stay away from a lot of pec strengthening, because that's going to create more internal rotation, more engagement of the pecs, which should create more adhesiveness to the joint. So we want to open up these anterior muscles. We want to work on the rear. And I can't say enough about going seeing a therapist or someone in the medical community to get hands-on massage, myofascial stretching, joint mobilization, and good quality care.
Very, very good. And we got another question. What would you recommend for shoulder bone spurs? I have a feeling these people are suffering. So what would you do with that, Chris?
That's a great question. I see that every day. Well, not every day, every week. I had it today at a patient, and that's classic with OA, osteoarthritis, which is a breaking down the joint line. If someone has a shoulder bone spur, as I said earlier, when we first started talking, all of us as a whole, I'd stay away from shoulder presses, because that's going to load the joint. That's going to create more micro trauma, more compression load, and more forces. Stretch the pecs. Sound like a broken record, you guys, but I'm sorry. Stretch the pecs, stretch the tight, stretch the upper traps, work the rows, do rhomboids, and then integrate slowly side raises, probably elbow bent versus arm straight, and work the rotator cuff. We call those no monies, where you're doing this or external rotation out. And again, low trapezius, and as Andrew said, the serratus punch. So if you want to save your shoulder, if you want a client who has a bone spur, not have surgery, don't do a lot of chest, don't do shoulder press, and make sure they follow your lead, because it's only going to get worse, because calcification tendonitis is only going to get worse, right? It's a bone spur. It's calcification. It's going to create tension on the tendon. And so if you load that tendon over and over and over again, it's going to cause it to fray, period.
Yeah. And Summer, are there certain exercises or positions that you might recommend for people that do have a bone spur, or, in sticking with our active agers, maybe an individual that might have a frozen shoulder?
Oh, my mouse didn't want to work there. Yeah, and I think a lot of what Chris just hit was spot on with that. I would agree in that my big thing would be to avoid any type of overhead, as well as in a yoga type situation. I wouldn't have them be doing things like a downward dog, because that's going to have a lot of pressure into it as well, because of that angle that you are at. So I want to think of, it was similar to what Andrew had, but one of my favorite things is like, if you have the band and you have them do some type of pulling here, but then I want to hold it as well. So you've got that hold and that just isometric type contraction. You can do the same thing with your elbows bent. Another one that I really like is like, if you take your arms kind of at this like 45 degrees, so you're not all the way overhead, but you're at this 45 degree, and you kind of do a row from right here. So it's that rowing type position where you're getting that squeeze, but I really enjoy the one-sided nature. So doing it one at a time, and even to what Andrew had mentioned at one point of like putting a hand on someone's back for that feedback, if you've got the accessibility and capabilities of being able to do it. I always say one of my very first clients ever, when I was like a baby trainer, I'm like, oh, I know all my stuff, because you know that's what you know when you're 12. She was 70 and she said, Summer, my only goal, don't care about my weight, don't care about any of that, which is like what she was accepting. She's like, all I want to be able to do is put on my bra in the back. And because she said right now what she had to do was she had to put it on, and then she was like scooching it around, because that movement of being able to get into the back is something that as individuals who wear a bra want to be able to have that click. So I started to think about that a lot over my career of like, how do I just make sure an active ager and someone can keep their hand in that position? So I like to literally just have people hold like this, where their hands are on their back and they're trying to squeeze and into some of those like opening of the chest and things. But when we focus on it down here versus up here, we can help assist with that. Hey, I want to be able to put on a bra behind me. And so that's one of those like life practical things that it's not, that I just kind of gained and went with.
I don't think Andrew, Patrick, or Chris can relate, but it's an activity of daily.
Oh, no,
living
I can.
for
I
us.
absolutely can.
All right, and Patrick, what I like, Summer did this with the Dynaband, the stretch, which we love that. But I know with Symmetry, when I'm doing my exercises, I'm holding the Symmetry band, which is not a stretchy band at all. It's a solid, it's almost like a yoga strap, and I'm just pushing against it. Is there a reason for the stability?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm initially, when clients come in, I'm very isometrically focused. And what I mean is I'm really trying to target those intrinsic muscles that are designed just to hold a joint in place. Rotator cuff muscles assist in movement, but their primary role is to really hold the joint in place. But again, if we're here, I don't really want to move the shoulder into a range of motion, because structurally those muscles have formed into that compensation. So using straps, the floor press, where you're on the floor and you're just squeezing and releasing, these are real non-invasive techniques. Isometrics used to be a huge deal in the 50s and 60s before lifting weights was introduced, right? I mean, it used to be the sexy way of training. But then we got into, personal records and lifting, and we got away from that intrinsic strength and that intrinsic, and what I call intrinsic integrity. So using straps that don't stretch initially really help to secure the joint in a very non-invasive way.
Oh, that's great. That's really helpful. I can't even believe this. We are just about out of time, which is crazy. We could keep going for 2 hours here. I'm going to show you real quickly. We have Certification Smash coming up May 19th through 21st, where we have all our certifications. We have personal training, we have nutrition ones. I'm just going to show you this short video here. That's great. I love seeing that what's going on. We also have talks and takes coming up. Talks and Takes is a wonderful, it's not really a webinar, it's a talk show with Brent Darden, Bill McBride, and Blair McKinney, and yours truly. And we're doing it Wednesday night, April 12th, actually during the day, 2 p.m. East Coast time. And I'll just show you a little bit about what we talk about within Talks and Takes. This is great, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please join us on Talks and Takes April 12th, which is just, I think, next week, next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Carter, thank you for managing this for us. Andrew, Patrick, Summer, and Chris, fabulous to see you. If you guys are interested in more on symmetry at our Certification Smash, Patrick is doing a shorter certification course for us on the program, something that will really help you guys as personal trainers and group fitness instructors grow your income to be able to do these type of assessments and recommendations for exercises. So I want to thank you all for joining me. I know that this information is incredibly helpful. Carter, would you do me a favor and make sure you throw in that link to Certification Smash, so that they can sign up for Patrick's cert if they'd like to, or the SCW personal training program. You can register for as little as $99 for a certification. Woohoo, love that, especially in this economy, right? Thank you for joining us. We'll see you all next Thursday. Everybody have a wonderful evening.